Welcome back, I'm rather Incoherent, and it's time to start theory crafting decks with all of the spoiled stuff for the new campaign, The Drowned City. Me personally, I immediately want to work on Flexmark Harrigan because it's one of my favorite decks, and a new card promises to fix the deck's biggest problem. That new card is Unconventional Method, and the problem is relatively straightforward. In older versions of Flexmark Harrigan, you really couldn't flex very effectively at level 0. You were basically a fighter at level 0 that got a couple of clues, and then around scenario 2 or 3, you would transition to being a full-on support-oriented flex character, and that sort of put some weird pressure on your team because you would need someone like a Fighter Finn who starts off as Flex Finn and becomes Fighter Finn to sort of role swap with you. And now, with Unconventional Method adding some more ways for you to get clues in level 0, you can legitimately call yourself a fight-oriented flex character in Mark Harrigan if you're just willing to run Unconventional Method. So the question then becomes, if we're running this, how does the deck need to change? And one thing to note is that the deck is now notably more expensive and cannot be running Runic Axe. Whereas Act of Desperation does give you the resource cost of the weapon you're throwing away, Unconventional Method does not, it just gives you the extra value. And that's fair to me, 2 clues is more valuable than 2 damage, so it doesn't get the resources, but that's an economy demand that needs to be cared about. The fact you're not running Runic Axe doesn't hurt you at all at level 0. Frankly, running a pair of 45 automatics and a pair of Remington model 1858s is going to be better at level 0 than a Runic Axe. The big benefit of the Remington model 1858 though, is that now if you were using this, if it runs out of bullets, you can act in desperation at a man, get all the money back, and then shoot him with the Remington you just threw at him using the reaction on the Remington, right? That's a very cool combo that's not open to many characters. I think it's basically just Marion, Yorick, and Mark. I'm very willing to be wrong about that. Oh, and Tommy. I always forget about Tommy. So that's a very cool combo and one of the things I wanted to do in this level 0 deck. And on the whole, the level 0 deck doesn't have to make that many compromises to get much better at finding clues. It's still not a ton, it's just Unconventional Method, winging it, and then base 2 book with 2 copies of Perception, which is not a whole hell of a lot. But you can use Sophie, you have Tetsuo Mori for Soak, you have Hallowed Mirror, you draw your whole deck, you have Second Wind. You have enough healing to reliably get, I would say, at least 4 triggers off of these cards cycling through your whole deck, get like 8 clues over a scenario, and for a fight-oriented flex, that's not terrible. This character can be on a lot more teams than the original fight transition character that Flexmark used to have to play in scenario 1. So that's really cool, and I do genuinely think this is probably a stronger level 0 deck, but there are some problems with it. One is that it's fairly expensive, but you'll notice I've cut Overpower. If you want to go into Bestow Resolve, you'll have to buy Overpower level 2 down the line, and when I say if you want to go into Overpower, that's the real problem. Because when I look at upgrading this deck, and I really want to play the deck with level 4 Remington model 1858, I shoot 3 bullets out of it, I throw it at somebody, I shoot them again, and then I use Well Prepared to put it back in my hand. There's some really sick tricks you can do if you upgrade in this archetype. But there's no room for Bestow Resolve. We're already gonna have to cut 4 cards if we want to run Bestow Resolve, right? We need 2 copies of Bestow, 2 copies of Overpower, and what 4 cards you taking out of the deck? It's obviously not skills, it can't be the weapons you're throwing, you need these to survive. Safeguard's some of the best action compression in the game. I'm not gonna go through the events, you get the idea. Every card is so core and so uncuttable that going into Bestow and really playing the same sort of support flex as the old Mark isn't really viable. I personally don't think upgrading this is gonna be the strongest thing Mark can do, right? Finding a way to make awkward upgrades and transition back into the original Bestow Runic Axe shell is probably the strongest deck you can make. But no one wants to talk about Runic Axe, no one cares about this. Let's talk about the hype new shit instead. This Flexmark, in my opinion, is obviously transparently weaker. It doesn't have Bestow Resolve, it doesn't have the same level of team support that Bestow Resolve offers. You can't crush any scenario tests, you can't drag anyone kicking and screaming through a Mythos test, but you still have a lot of the power of Mark, right? You still have Guts manual decks for yourself, you're saving experience allowing you to go for Gradish Gardakia, so you can still solve your own Mythos resilience by getting an infinite soak ally that's helping you pass all of your tests. So the real question is, what are we getting in exchange for giving up Bestow and Runic Axe in terms of clue finding and flexing? Well, we're getting Well Maintained, which is usually not a good start to a power gaming discussion, but Well Maintained's a lot better when you're running Act of Desperation, so you're able to throw your weapon at somebody, discarding it at will, and that allows you to trigger Well Maintained and get it back to your hand to reload it, which works very, very well with the Remington model 1858. Just Act of Desperation on its own will throw the gun at them, then fire the gun at them, dealing 4 damage, likely leaving you free to replay the gun at that point and shoot somebody else if anyone else is still alive at your location. You can do similar things with Unconventional Method, it's just inherently much more awkward using Unconventional Method, and the reason for that is simply because it provokes attacks of opportunity. So juggling the Remington in front of a guy with it will still be very action efficient. You'll still get 2 clues and deal 2 damage, but you're gonna get slapped for it. So if it's a rat, eat your heart out, right? You're just gonna get to draw a card for free because you're Mark Harrigan. But if it's somebody that actually hits for real and relevant numbers, maybe don't go for it. But there's a lot more action compression here with the Remington Model 1858 Act of Desperation combo. Not enough to counteract losing Runic Axe, but enough that this is still a very strong deck that should be able to complete any campaign with relative ease. It is a much cooler deck than old Flexmark, but it doesn't have any of the support elements of that Flexmark that made me love it. It's flashy as hell. Anyone who enjoys Act of Desperation decks will probably love this deck. I do wonder if there's a way to get Art of War in here. I spent a while looking at that, both at level 0 and the upgraded version, and I really couldn't find a way to make the economy work. That was the main problem, right? Because if I'm using well-maintained with Unconventional Method, that's an economy loss, right? Because I have to replay the gun and I don't get money back. If I am using any of my tactics in this deck, they all cost money, they don't generate it, so you need to find room for Gang Up 2 probably. Sorry, not Gang Up, clean them out. The tactic event that gives you a basic fight action and 2 resources, and trying to fit in 4 cards into this list to solve the economy problems and counter similar issues as trying to run Bestow Resolve, right? But the deck looks very solid. Like, this is only 23 experience. Remington Model 1858 and Garish are both very powerful 4 experience cards that feel like they're very good ways to spend your experience. The rest of it's going into a stick to the plan, E-Cash, Ever Vigilant setup, basically. And of course, you need your well-maintains so that you can keep playing your Remington Model 1858s. I probably don't care about well-maintained in terms of upgrade order until I have the Remington upgrades, but at the same time, if I were playing this deck, I'm probably going to upgrade them immediately just because that feels like the flashy thematic core of the deck. I personally don't really feel that there's a way to get a ton of value out of Art of War in this archetype. You'd have to probably fully give up on the Remington to free up your hand slots and your economy to focus on specifically using Art of War and being event reliant. And I think there's a way to make that deck and have it succeed and beat campaigns, but I think it's much less powerful and frankly less hilarious than shooting them with the gun you're throwing at them and then actually picking the gun back up with well-maintained and shooting them again from the play action too. It's just a very flashy, cool twist on Flexmark. Because of Garish Kadakia, I think it's Mythos Resilience. Like, you just have enough soak and enough stat pumps. Anytime you want, you can tap Sophie, tap Garish, take 1 damage, draw a card, and gain +4 skill value. You should just be safe to the Mythos test. I really like this deck. I don't like it as much as the original Flexmark because I am a sucker for Bestow Resolve. I don't really give a shit about losing the Runic Axe, but Bestow Resolve is a lot of team support, it's very valuable to me. Regardless though, this is a very cool new thing that Mark can do. I think he's probably the best at this specific version of it, where you're relying on Garish for your Mythos Resilience and trying to get damage out of the Remington. And I really am looking forward to playing this just to see how it compares to a Michael McGlynn, Robert Castaigne Remington deck, because I think these are gonna be the 2 best decks at utilizing the Remington specifically. And I'm really interested if any Guardian can really hold up to what Robert's promising to do for rogues. And when I say rogues, plural, I mean very specifically Michael McGlynn and nobody else. Because his ability is just so much less valuable if you don't have access to Remington 4. But yeah, that'll be all for today. This is a short one because I'm largely talking about a deck I've covered multiple times before. There is a new way to build Flexmark. At level 0, it gives you the ability to genuinely play Flexmark in Scenario 1. And sure, it's a massively fight-oriented Flex deck, but it's going to fit into way more teams than the old Flexmark did, right? Because at Scenario 1, the old Flexmark was just Fighter Mark with winging it, basically. And then the Act of Desperation, Unconventional Method, Remington, well-maintained loop, all of that's very cool stuff where Mark's better at piecing it together than anyone other than Tommy, and has better stats and better Mythos Resilience than Tommy would, because sure, theoretically, Tommy's better at tanking than Mark is, but not when you actually need to fit cards in your deck to do all of this bullshit, right? You can definitely make a similar deck in Tommy, but I hate Tommy too much to try. I'll leave that to somebody else. I'm fairly confident the Mark version will end up being better, but I'm looking forward to see what people end up cooking within this archetype for other characters. Anyways, that'll be all for now, but before I go, as always, thank you for your time. If you made it this far, then please do hit all the buttons for the algorithm, really does help the channel out, and a massive thank you to everyone supporting this channel, both over here on Patreon as patrons and here on YouTube as channel members. I'll see all of you in the next one.